Welcome to the deep dive of the new map Resort Canal that just arrived in the Gnomecoming update. Compared to those from the recent Arcane update, Resort Canal is much larger and much more difficult, especially for solo players. As a dual rift map, players are forced to divide their traps and defend on multiple fronts, essentially playing two smaller maps at the same time. I'm going to cover a few different topics in this video, so check the time codes on the screen and in the description if there's a specific thing you want to watch. Let's get started. First, let's do a quick walk through the map. We have a rift right here at street level, kind of on this promenade beach area, and we have a second rift up higher at the Lighthouse, as you can see kind of up there between those pillars. And the two sections are totally separated. Enemies can't travel between them. We have this canal splitting up the map. There are a few ways for the human players to get across between the two areas, but enemies will not by themselves go across. You can physics trap them back and forth, but for the most part, totally separated. So we have the first gate here in the southwest. It's open from the beginning. These enemies will head towards that lower rift, of course. Then we have a nice big open area. There's a lower kind of dock front market area that you can utilize. Then there's a nice big pool and a raised platform along the western part of the map. As we get up to the northwest corner, we have this small staircase down that is ready for your morning stars to just bounce back and forth, killing enemies if you decide to route them that way. We have a small store inside that is hard to use, and then we have another gate which opens up on wave 3, I believe. This gate also goes to that same lower rift. As we come down, we have a nice wide staircase. This gnome balloonist is not always here. They randomly spawn, so we do have some extra ceiling space along this route today, but in your game you might not have that. So we have a nice wide path around that leads back to the rift. So the fairly straightforward pathing there. We have a wooden bridge here. Now the enemies will not use this bridge, but at the top there is a cannoneer you can hire for 5,000 coins. And this brings you to the top of the lighthouse with the second rift. We have this gate here that opens up on wave 4. And we have a nice kind of rectangle here that leads from the eastern gate here over to the rift. We can either go along here with the nice ceiling space, even some high ceilings right there, and then go across this bridge to the rift, or we can go up this small staircase. If we head down, we have this nice long bridge that comes down to the shop and the gate, although it's more of a ship, obviously, that is open from wave 1, and these two gates are headed towards the Lighthouse Rift. There is quite a bit of space around the base of this tower that you could route the enemies if you have a lot of barricades, but starting out, you probably won't be able to make use of much of this terrain. There are these boats right here to help you get back across from each side to the other, but then we're just back to the staircase, and that is pretty much the map. Since this map is effectively two separate smaller maps that you play simultaneously, instead of giving a couple full map barricade setups, I'm going to instead give a couple setups for each portion of the map. So a couple for the lighthouse section up here, and a couple for the promenade section down there, and then you can mix and match them depending on the number of barricades you have, the number of traps you have, that sort of thing, and come up with your own personal favorite setup. So for the lighthouse section, as I said in the walkthrough, this is effectively a large rectangle with the enemies coming up the stairs from down below on the kind of northwest section, and then more enemies spawning in the northeast section over here. But right here, there's not any place to kill them. We have a staircase with no walls, no ceiling, very little floor space, so I advise just blocking this off right away and using the other two sides of this rectangle. Because this side you have wall space, you have ceiling space, high ceilings and low ceilings both, and you can make pretty good use of this. So the first setup will be a fairly straightforward one. We will use something like 7 barricades here, or 6 barricades here, plus the 3 over there, so 9 total. And with this setup, you will want to slow the enemies down as they come across here, do something like a push trap to try to knock them back over the barricade, and then they will have to come back around here. There's also, as I said, low ceiling space. You could move this if you prefer high ceiling space, or you want to just set up more. You could set up
A barricade.
another similar setup right here, and set up more push traps. And actually, you wouldn't need that, and that would work just as well. The problem with this, I feel, is that it is just a single path, so there's not a ton of room for traps. The trap cooldowns could be a problem, but if you're gonna just stand right here, you can just, especially range, just shoot just right down this one corridor, hit all the enemies, whatever enemies first, and make good use of your War Mage damage that way, and your War Mage special attacks, because they're just all grouped up in a single line. Now, if instead you wanted to maze them a little bit, I would suggest doing something like this.
I'll redirect them to my traps.
And this one I feel is a little bit better because it's more expandable if you have more barricades, or if you have more money to spend on the rift barricades. So with this is 9 barricades here. You could cut it off to just 6 barricades if you're really hurting on number of barricades. You still have to have those 3 over there, of course, but with this, we now maze them back and forth a little bit. Your push traps are a little bit weaker. You can't knock them over a barricade. There's just no wall space over here. So overall, a lot weaker wall space coverage, but once you do a bit more mazing, you have a lot better ceiling space coverage and just a lot more floor space coverage as well. You still can, of course, attack them with your War Mage, same as the other strategy, but they're not all lined up like they were. So it is a little bit more, or less efficient. Of course, you can do the same thing down here, and do just like a little bit of extra mazing using these high ceilings and try to, get them primed before they hit the end of your kill box over here. But that would, of course, that's almost all your barricades right there. And I'm just playing solo, and I haven't even touched the promenade section. So this would be a much later game strategy. Let's take a look at some kill boxes with traps installed, just to see what these 2 setups might look like. For the first kill box, I'm using tar and acid geysers for the floor traps, morning stars and push traps for the walls, and ceiling lasers and ice lances for the ceilings. The idea is that we slow down and group up the enemies as much as possible with the tar, the ice lances, and the push traps, and then let the massive damage from the ceiling lasers, acid geysers, and especially the morning stars just wipe everybody out. These morning stars will just bounce back and forth. They'll bounce off of the barricades themselves, and since it's just one wide, they'll just bounce back and forth incredibly quickly, dealing a massive damage to everyone who walks through. Anyone who does make it through will be hopefully melted by the acid traps here, which means you'll do extra damage to them as they try to run to the end here. You should hopefully be able to take them out pretty quickly. Plus, this ice lance will hopefully freeze them on their way, and you can just take them out. So yeah, this is the first strategy. It works pretty well. For the second setup, we have tar, spike traps, and the rift barricades. For our floor traps, we have arrow walls and wall blades for the wall traps, swinging mace, poison emitter, and an ice lance for the ceiling traps. I can't tell you how much I suggest just singular ice lances. Looking at your kill box, it feels like they're just so good. Well worth their heavy price tag. Anyway, we're using the rift barricades to buff up the spike traps on the floor, and then we have arrow walls to just hopefully shotgun down this whole path as they walk down it. Same with this path. And yeah, it should work very well. The bounce traps, unfortunately, with this, because it's such an open wall and we don't have just a line of barricades like we did last time, we can't really make use of the bounce traps very well. But we can make use of the physics traps, try and knock them out. And the poison traps should just add basically a couple extra combo points to everyone who walks by, which gives us a little bit more money, and we can always just extend this down, do something like this, and then if we really want to do something, if we just make, loads of money, we can do something like that and just loop them a bit more, or do something down here. If we did something down here, we need to switch up which traps we use, since these won't affect down low, but if we switch this to like the shock zapper or the ceiling laser like we just had, that would work just as well over on the high ceiling section as well as down here. Let's take a quick look at a third setup that might be a little bit riskier, but I think is more fun. This third barricade setup is for large area floor traps such as minecart dispensers and tracks, briar, and cursed ground once it starts expanding with the threads. So we have 2 barricades here, so we still have the 3 barricades over there, of course, because otherwise the enemy will just go directly to the rift. And we have 2 barricades here. The idea being we just kind of force them against this wall, line up our large area traps right along here, and stun them, freeze them, push them, all that sort of stuff, to keep them on the, frequently damaging large area traps as much as possible. It's fairly straightforward. We have 2 ice lances to try to keep them frozen. We do have a shock zapper here to try to limit the number of small enemies that get farther, because we don't want the minecarts to get caught up on too many small enemies. But we could always switch this with something else if Briar doesn't really care about that, for example. And yeah, it works very well. And if you love minecarts and want to have use for them, here's one way to do it. The first barricade strategy for the northwestern portion of the map will be to fight the enemy's poolside right along here. So to accomplish that, we'll first need to block off this wide path kind of in the northeast section of the map. Coming back down along by the corner, we need to block off the staircase. And then here's the poolside area where we'll fight everybody. And we can block right here with just 10 barricades. We have a nice thin path here, perfect hazard for physics traps, and it's, pretty easy. Let's set up some traps and see what a kill box might look like. With 2 extra barricades and 2 rift barricades, we've set up a little bit of a maze going through here, and the rift barricades are doing a ton of buffing here, increasing the damage of not only the ice vents, the acid geysers, but also the wall chargers. So, they're just really pulling their weight here. If you can't quite afford the barricades, we can always remove those and do a little bit less damage, as enemies will just go, quickly through here. We'd probably want to shift this over here. Same with that one. But eventually, hopefully, you'll make enough money that you can just put down a couple rift barricades if you can't afford or unlock more regular barricades. But through the fullness of the map, hopefully you can do something like this as well and just get them to loop even more, or not loop, but maze even more. You can also do something like this to force them over underneath this low ceiling and do some damage here, especially if you have any bounce traps. This is a much better place for bounce traps than right along this path, because the bounce traps will just bounce into the water and be not as very helpful. But yeah, this should work very well for you. Let's take a look at another strategy. For this strategy, we'll be using this small staircase with really tight walls to maximize the damage from bounce traps. And actually, the barricade setup is pretty close to the last one, so we'll have these 4 barricades over here just past that gate. And we'll have those same 4 barricades kind of funneling the enemies to the north. But instead of blocking off the staircase, we'll just block off at the end of the poolside path that we used as our kill box in the first strategy. That'll force everybody upstairs. You can see them walking across there, and then they'll come down here. Now, if you have 3 more barricades, which for this strategy, I think you probably do want those 3 extra barricades, we can put 3 here. And now the enemies have to go a lot further, giving you just a lot more space to both just use war mage damage as well as more space for traps, just do massive amounts of damage. So let's take a look at what the trap setup might look like for this. For this setup, I have briar patches and tar for my floor traps. I have morning stars and push traps for my wall traps, and I have molten gold and ice lances for my ceiling traps. So the idea of the briar is that over the course of a couple waves, this one will expand all the way down and around, and eventually meet up with this guy, who should hopefully just grow this way as well once these guys start spawning, and just, prime everybody for coming down this path. We already do a lot of damage, but, taking away a decent chunk of everybody's health would be nice, of course. So that's the plan for the briar. Once they come down here, the molten gold should shiny most of them, many of them. And then we have a lot of stunning and then a lot of damage from these morning stars once they get down here. The tar slowing them down, the morning stars just bouncing back very rapidly, doing massive amounts of damage. And then I can sit, somewhere right about here, hopefully be out of the line of fire for most of the enemies. Some of the archers do like shooting down, so you do have to be careful, but hopefully it's not too bad. And then, just hacking and slashing as soon as they come around the corner. But I don't expect very many will. This is a very reliable setup. Morning stars will do massive damage. Just the tighter the hallway, the better bounce traps are. Too wide is normally about the best you're ever going to get. Very rarely will you get that one wide path, but this too wide will just do amazingly well. Just fill up this with morning stars and then put more morning stars down and more morning stars, and nobody's going to get through. Let's look at one last quick strategy. For the last barricade setup, we'll be fighting the enemies up here in this northeastern passageway. To accomplish that, we only need 7 barricades, making it the cheapest option. We can put 4 there and 3 along here to just block all traffic towards the rift, force everybody to go all the way back and around. Now, if this huge wide stretch of path is great for Briar, but enemies will mostly come down here but sometimes come up there, as you can see with that one guy. So if you have 2 more barricades, you can block off the bottom of the staircase. And that makes both Briar along here, as well as any sort of physics trap, incredibly effective. The enemy will be knocked down here, down by the pool, and have to walk all the way back around again. Also really effective would be minecarts. Once again, you gotta love minecarts. And you set it up, and then the enemies will just go flying, and wherever they go flying, it's fine because we've blocked off by the rift itself, so they'd have to go, really far through the air to get past those barricades. So no matter how they go, they'll have to, take a really long path back. The Briar can expand. You can have really long paths with the minecart tracks if that's something you prefer. And then once we come all the way over here, we haven't used very many barricades. So maybe you can do a little bit of mazing or forcing the enemy, like something like this, to force enemies out of this gate to at least walk backwards a little bit. And then again, you could try to physics trap them back over the barricades, or you could just try to get them lined up for, some Briar expansion, something along those lines. You could also, again, set up some minecart tracks along here. Along here to knock them back. You're not guaranteed to have this ceiling right here, but if you do, you could definitely bring some low ceiling traps and really make use of it. Do a little bit of amazing here if you have the barricades, and that would probably just take care of everyone very easily. Just do something like this. Put your, your ceiling pounders down, your haymakers, whatever. Do massive amounts of damage. That works great. With this staircase, you can always use bomb dispensers. Bomb dispensers love a staircase. You can see them just bouncing along there. And actually, they perfectly line up for that hole. I did not plan that. That just kind of worked out. But if you wanted to do something like this, the bombs would work wonderfully. As you can see, they just funnel right into that maze there. Or something like ceiling lasers to just try to cover as much ceiling as possible. That could also work. But this is a bit weaker. It's a wide path, which is just, always harder to focus damage on the enemies because they have to walk over. They can walk over many different areas or not walk near the walls, that sort of thing. So while it does use the least number of barricades outright and has some good straightaways and large sections for Briar or minecarts, I think overall it is probably the weakest, but you're getting those extra barricades that you can maybe use up at the Lighthouse. And if you have a couple players sitting here, especially like Sophie with Bartholomew or something along those lines, then it doesn't matter that it's a little bit wider. You just have the War Mage aggro to just keep the enemies here while the bombs rain down, that sort of thing. Let's take a look at chests. Starting in the middle of the map, there's a chest on the roof behind where you spawn in. While it's easy to reach if you have extra movement abilities like Max's, it isn't too terrible to get there with the help of a trap staircase. Staying up on the rooftops, we can hug the wall and walk around the ledge around the corner to get to another rooftop chest. Jumping down from the roof, one can spawn in the northwest corner of the map. Through the nearby doors, you can find one inside the shop. Heading south along the western path, a chest can be nestled into the corner. Just underneath that by the gate is another possible spawn. Continuing south down to the dock area, one can be between the stairs. Across the map in the northeast corner, the nook can hold a chest. To the south, you can jump behind the waterfall to find one. Heading up and around the nearby wooden walkway, one can spawn in at the end. Next to the main staircase up to this floor is another spot. All the way down by the orc ship is a chest location. And finally on the docks down in the canal is the last spawn. Thank you for watching this deep dive video. If you know any information or strategies that you think I should have included, tell me in the comments. Also let me know which maps you'd like to see a video for next. Later, War Mages.